So I just received my Sony RX10 Mark III. I haven't bought a camera for a long time, and I was looking a lot on the market and looking at different categories of cameras, and I really found this to be kind of a new thinking, very flexible way of thinking about a camera that I think will be a good fit. So let's go ahead and open this thing up. Papers. So this is good to know. It actually does not come with the dedicated separate battery charger. It only comes with a cable and adapter to plug it into the wall in the camera itself. So if you want to charge the batteries on the side, you're not able to do that. Let me show you I have the battery charger here from my Sony A7S. Here you go. This is the one I'm talking about. So with this I guess you would have to buy separately. I've heard people say that it feels pretty heavy when you pull it out of the box, and it's not very heavy. I would say it's in the ballpark of an A7, how it feels. It's a little bit less well balanced perhaps than an A7, I would say that. The grip here on the right side feels very kind of long and skinny to the side to hold. So it feels, and it definitely is kind of a little bit front heavy, but it's all in all a fairly compact camera. I can definitely see myself being able to put this in a bag and taking it with me. And I would say that's really the primary reason I went ahead and bought this camera, is because I want to be able to have a camera that I will actually take with me, that I won't decide, you know what, this would be cool to have a camera, but I'm not gonna lug my big camera with me. And I've looked at cameras. I've even considered going back to a more traditional professional camcorder, such as the new Z150 of Sony's. I love the Sony codecs. I love their kind of new technology, the way that they are forward and kind of new thinking, more so than some traditional brands. And I come from a Canon background. I have had a Nikon before, but that was a long time ago. And all in all, I just feel like Sony fits really well with my philosophy of how I think of what I expect from my cameras, what I want them to do for me. And this really seemed like an interesting flexibility sweet spot of all the different things I get in one camera. And the primary reason I was looking at more traditional camcorders was because I wanted to be able to capture longer sessions. But then, I mean, of course, you have the 30-minute limit on these more traditional cameras, still cameras that you can use for good video. But when I started thinking that I can actually have other means of recording professional sound, maybe even relying a little bit more on these inputs, that this camera actually have. I mean, you have your headphone out, you have your microphone input. There are obviously several accessories you can use to plug in a microphone directly into this camera. Rode now makes the interesting filmmaker kit microphone that goes directly onto this thing and records sound through a wireless mic. That I can see myself using that for the majority of time when I'm capturing a talking head. And as far as capturing longer sessions, I can definitely see myself utilizing the HDMI outputs on this thing. I've started using that more on my Sony A7 at the school where I work for, and it actually works fairly well to record the output. And of course, your external recorder will be able to capture longer clips than your camera will do with its 30-minute limit. While I definitely don't intend to depend on this camera to always have a kit of an outside external recorder, separate sound and all that all the time, I can definitely see myself being willing to do that when I'm doing a more long-term setup, a studio setup, when I'm recording longer sessions. Typically, if I'm recording a longer session, I'm very rarely going to be in a run and gun situation. So for that reason, I feel like I have a good, very flexible camera that will allow me to get great 4K footage on the go, and I can still come into the studio and get a pretty decent setup here where I have good lighting. I'm not as dependent on the A7S-like sensitivity that I'm used to. I can use this in a studio where I have good lighting and where the 1-inch sensor in this camera will be able to hold its own quite well. So in theory, I'm thinking this will be a great setup for me to shoot longer sessions. I'll be able to record, long teaching sessions. I'll be able to record, if I wanted to record something like a wedding, where I might want the camera to go for a longer period of time. Of course, you can run this on a battery setup, but I've also gone ahead and used this with a DC adapter that I have from the Sony A7S. The nice thing with this when you're in a studio environment, of course, is that you can go ahead and depend on that to stay connected, to stay powered up. I even have the Shogun powered by external power. And that way I never have to worry about battery life or length of clips when I'm shooting this way. I don't know if at some point I might run into some overheating, but if so, it seems more likely that it would happen here than on here, because this camera is actually not recording anything right now. So when I was thinking about what camera to buy, this price point of the RX10 Mark III allows me to still have budget for accessories, things I could buy to really support the quality of the things I want to do. I don't want to blow my whole budget on just the camera alone. And on top of budget, of course, I get amazing flexibility. And that's something I feel like a lot of people underestimate the power of when they're out there doing run and gun videography, is flexibility, portability. Because there's a lot of big cameras that are very flexible in what they can do, but actually taking them with you is a pain, especially if you're going on something that's not a dedicated, big professional job, and you showing up with a big camcorder like the Z150 that I was also thinking about would be kind of in people's face, might rub people the wrong way, might distract them, it might actually cause limitations for where you're able to take it, versus if I'm shooting with a little tourist camera, I am pretty free to come and go as I please, just as much as any other person. So that's a huge benefit. When I was recording on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, they were very picky about what kind of cameras they allowed you to take up there. Even getting up there yourself is quite restricted. And we shot with some just slightly more professional looking JVC cameras at the time that were not even that big, just, you know, prosumer level camcorders. But they, with their mic, you know, handles and everything, that alone was enough to cause suspicion, where people definitely would not have allowed us up there with that. I took my, at the time, Canon 7D, shot all my video on that, and was able to bring it fine, just coming across as a tourist. So, and actually walk away with some pretty professional looking footage. That, to me, is one of the strong suits. If you ever see yourself traveling, if you see yourself doing more portable work, having a camera like the RX10 could be a real strength. And of course, if you do more things, you have more business to justify buying multiple cameras, you can invest in other cameras for other purposes. But for me, if I had to pick one camera to do it all, the only other thing I can see myself perhaps going with would be in the A7 series. The downside with that, pricing. Even if I wanted to spend the money itself on the camera, the A7S, the A7R, especially the second generations, they're great cameras, fantastic. I love shooting with the A7S that I have here at work, but buying lenses for that thing is so pricey. So unless you have enough of a kind of a money laying around, or a, you know, business coming in that it justifies the expense, if so, go for it if that's what you want. But also portability, flexibility, you're going to be lugging those lenses around. You're going to be taking time to swap out the lenses. Here, I've got all my lenses and focal ranges in one camera. I don't have to switch a lens on this thing. Can that be a bad thing? Absolutely. I won't have primes on this thing with amazing apertures and just tremendous looking pictures, but it will do probably 80% of that job most of the time. Enough so that, like, the pros outweigh the cons. I mean, ask yourself, like, how badly do you need those things? And do they overweigh the benefits that you would get from a more flexible camera? People are different, their preferences are different, and that's absolutely fine. But I would just challenge you to think about it. Now, if I was recording audio on this thing, I would probably use the Rode wireless mic that I'm thinking about buying, attaching it on here, and records the audio directly through a wireless lab mic like the one I'm wearing, except mine is corded. And had the audio feed go directly into the camera, and that would go with the HDMI cord and record straight onto the Shogun. You could, of course, always use the accessories for the Shogun, plug XLR audio cables directly into the Shogun, and run things that way, whatever you prefer. And of course, you could always record externally using something like a Zoom H5, Zoom H4n, whatever you have laying around. Okay, I think that pretty much concludes what I wanted to take time to say here today. So I hope that was helpful to maybe some of you. I might follow up when I have a little bit more. I've literally spent now about half an hour with this camera. I'll spend a little bit more time with it, let you know if these assumptions I've made hold up, if I feel like it's worth it, if I made some good judgment calls, maybe not. We'll find out.